I'd like to welcome everybody to the Houston County Historical Society meeting. Ms. Deborah Stanfield, our president, is not able to be with us tonight, so I was called on to take her place, and I hope I do it justice. Would you all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Ms. Jackie's going to lead it for us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I hope that everyone got their minutes, either by email or snail mail. I'm the one who sends those out, so if you are not getting it, or if it's, I also call it a newsletter. If you're not on our newsletter list, because I send out a newsletter every Monday, please write your email address down on the sign-in sheet, and I'll be glad to add you to that list. Would someone like to make a motion that we accept the minutes from last month?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And next we're going to move to the treasurer's report, but before she does that, I'm going to, and she'll mention it probably, but I'm going to mention it a little more in detail. We did sell a book, and that's not necessarily unusual, but we sold a book to a lady in Michigan. Her name was Kay Tanner, and she lives in Michigan, and she called wanting to get a book for her sister for her birthday. So she purchased one of the pictorial history books, and I was able to ship it to her. She actually called me back today because I took one of the Historical Society note cards and thanked her for her purchase and put it in with the book. And she called me today and she says, "Do you all sell those note cards? I'd like to purchase some of those note cards." And I said, "No." I said, "We just use them for thank you cards." I said, she said, "Well, if you ever decide to sell those, let me know. We love note cards, my daughter and I, and we would buy some." So, next, we got actually another donation from someone who donated $250 to the Archives eBay fund. And her name is Carol Parchman Heck. Some of you may know her. She actually lives in Clinton, Tennessee, but her mother lives in Clarksville, Tennessee. So she comes and visits with her mother every so often. And then she comes to the archives. She spent some time with me on Friday, and she gave us a $250 donation for our eBay account, which, if those of you that don't know, we have an account in our budget where if I run across anything on eBay that is Houston County related, that it gives me the ability to purchase that item, and we can bring it back to the archives, bring it back home. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Leah for the treasurer's report.
And actually, those items, neither of that, what she just talked about, is in the financial report because that all happened in July. And also, as I mentioned last month, I was going to transfer $1,000 from the CD, roll over the CD and give us $1,000. Again, that will happen in July, hopefully Friday. So in June, we had income of 58 cents and we had expenses of $27.74. So the checking account only has $937.83, and the CD is at $11,276. So, and the eBay fund that Melissa mentioned will now have, what, $250 it was?
Mm-hmm.
Almost $325 in it. So.
And so the reason we're not spending it too fast is because I have to wait till there's something that comes along on eBay that is Houston County related, and if I want to pay for it. Right now, there's a D&C Auto Parts ink pen, but they're wanting like $33 for it, and so I'm like, no, I'm not going to spend $33 for that. So we have memorabilia from D&C Auto Parts. So when things come along that are good, we look into them.
I go over there and see if they still have any.
I'd like a motion to accept the treasurer's report, unless you have any questions.
So made.
A second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, the treasurer's report passed, accepted. We're going to move on to an archives update. Of course, I'm the archivist at the Houston County Archives Museum in the basement of the courthouse. Please come visit us. We actually had some wonderful visitors yesterday that were 3 homeschool girls. They looked to be in high school, and they were just out and about and decided to come visit the archives and museum. So that was kind of neat. They really enjoyed themselves. I don't have as much as an update on donations. I will say that I'm working on a couple of some donations that I'm got to get picked up, and one that I'm going to probably get tomorrow. But, you know, when you're cleaning out, or if you know people that have got families that were from here, especially some of the first families or some of the more well-known families that were in higher offices or teachers or something like that, and they have records, please tell them not to throw them away. You know, I know it's difficult sometimes to let those things go, but if you know your children and grandchildren are not going to want these, and when you're not here, they're going to throw them in the garbage, you know, bring them to the archives, because that's what we're there for, is to preserve our history. And the only way to do that is by records being donated, photographs being donated, scrapbooks, business ledgers. Miss Carol Parchman came to look at that Guy Parchman store ledger that we got. She was very excited about seeing that.
She had emailed me something about it too.
Yeah. So she was excited. So see, we have people coming to look at these records for their family history. It also helps us with local history. I get people that call all the time, especially with people moving into the area, and they're buying these older houses, and they call me and they say, I'm looking for the history on my house. Do you have any history? Who used to live here? House history is very difficult to do when you're looking at deed research. But if we have photographs or information, that's something I can pass along to them. And families, people are still researching their family history. And so I get emails and phone calls and visits all the time. And if I don't have any records or anything to share with them, you know, so I know that out there are basements and attics and closets and buildings filled with stuff. And so I just got to get it to the archive. So if you talk to people, please remind them of that. Some announcements. Those of you who were here last meeting and also were here a few meetings ago, Mr. Ron Tummelson was working on a book on the iron industry in Stewart County, and he has finished that book. So it is available. I have a flyer I will leave out here on the table. You can pick up one of these flyers. You can scan the QR code or go to Amazon and search, and you can purchase your book. I think it's $22.95 on Amazon. He is actually going to be getting some hard copies. I mean, you can purchase a hard copy by doing this, or you can purchase an electronic copy. But he's also getting some hard copies in. He said they should be in about the 18th. He has earmarked 10, the hard copies are going to be $25 a piece, but he's earmarked 10 copies specifically for the Houston County Historical Society at $20 a piece. So when I get those, it'll be first come, first serve, whoever wants to buy, and it'll be cash or check, because he doesn't take credit cards. So as soon as I get those, I'm hoping to have those at the next meeting. And the first 10 is $20, and then after that, it'll be $25. Or tonight, you can grab it and go order it tonight. So I will put that up. Next is one of the things I like to do is I like to tell you all about historical things that are going on around us. That's what I put in our newsletter that I send out every Monday. But our sister historical society, Stewart County Historical Society, has a lot of programming, great programming like we do. And they've got one coming up on Tuesday, July the 22nd at 6 o'clock at the museum. And it is History of the Business Practices of Land Between the Lakes with Kathy Kersey. And it doesn't sound like it's something really exciting until you read the description. And it says, to look at the formative years of land between the lakes under the Tennessee Valley Authority, the impact of eminent domain on the between the rivers communities, and how those events continue to influence the business model used by the U.S. Forest Service at LBL. So I've got a flyer for that if you want to pick it up. I encourage you to support the Stewart County Historical Society, support the Humphreys County, Dixon County, because Houston County was formed from those counties, and there's a lot of history between us that we should be sharing. Does anyone else have any other announcements of anything going on that we need to know about? All right, if Ski was here, she'd have something. So we're going to move on to our presentation. Our speaker was supposed to be Camden Lane tonight, but he had a scheduling conflict. And so I was asked to present, so I'm sorry, you have me. So this is a presentation that I actually is brand new for 2025. I've only given it once, and it was for Legacy. So it's recorded and on their website only for subscribers. So this is only the second time I've given it, but I think you're going to like it. Even if you're not a genealogist or actively researching your family history, or researching your female family ancestors. There's a lot of documents and photographs in this presentation from Houston County, including some from my own family history. So hopefully you can enjoy those. Okay, go ahead. And I hope you can see that okay, because it's the best we got. And I can't do the microphone and the laptop, so I'm going to just try to be very loud. Okay, we're going to talk about finding your elusive ancestors, your female ancestors, in a local archive. Many of us that do genealogy research, I hope you do research your female ancestors because they are just as important as our male ancestors. I find some genealogists start with those male ancestors, see how far back they can get on that line, which is great. But you know, your female ancestors also, I can do this, also have a lot to offer in the way of family history. I've actually been listening to some YouTube videos of some people out in the Appalachian region that are doing stories and putting them on YouTube about the Appalachian region, males, females, and their family, so it's pretty interesting. Our female ancestors have a lot to offer. I don't know about you, but a lot of times some of the more juicy or fascinating stories I find in my female ancestors. I have lots of stories, what they did, what they didn't do. And we're going to talk about different things that are kind of myths when it comes to researching our female ancestors that may deter you from doing that. This is actually a photograph from my husband's family history. It's Lou, Tennessee, and Lucy Burnine. The Burnine family name you probably know around here. They are part of my husband's family. The Burnines and the Barkers actually married twice within their family. So this is a photograph we have. Many think that their female ancestors were not very productive because for many generations they were housewives, they were wives, they were mothers. And I think that's a huge job for any female. But I think that a lot of genealogists think they didn't produce very many records because they never really left the home that much, which is really farthest from the truth. There are lots of ways to find your ancestors in records, especially your female ancestors. I find genealogists do not research their female ancestors before they got married. They usually start. When their female ancestors get married, that's when they start researching them. And your female ancestors can actually accomplish and do a lot of things before they have gotten married, even if they married young. They had dreams, they had ambitions, maybe due to certain laws like not being able to own land or not being able to work because they were female at certain times in our history. You may think, well, they couldn't do anything, but they did a lot. And so don't discount their lives before marriage. Let's see. Here's an example. Some of you in the audience may recognize this person. This is my husband's grandmother, Miss Ruth Athaline Burcham. She was married to Lanny Barker, and after his passing, she was married to Mr. Bill Reed. She lived in Tennessee Ridge. They lived right there on the corner of Grace Crossing. They had a house, they had a store, and then in the 60s, 70s, they put in the pool, Barker's pool that was up there at Grace Crossing. So this is her, this is before she married. She's on a horse, she's playing a guitar. The Burcham family and the Barker family are very musical. That's something I've learned about my husband's ancestry. I have no musical bones in my body or my family either, but they were very musical. When they would get together for reunions or even just get together, they would pull out guitars and banjos and all kinds of stuff. So she is actually holding her guitar. This is the guitar that she learned to play on. I still have this guitar in my office at home. It's a family treasure for us. But she told me a wonderful story. And that's why I have this Grand Ole Opry ticket, which came in a scrapbook in the archives, so I'm kind of using it. This is about the same time frame. Before she was married, and before my husband's grandfather was married on his mother's side, she's from my husband's father's side, Mr. Conley Stringfield, before they both married their spouses, they got together, because he played the banjo and she played the guitar, and they tried out for the Grand Ole Opry from Houston County. Now, I don't know if they actually went to the Grand Ole Opry and tried out, or if the Grand Ole Opry was here and they tried out, because the Grand Ole Opry was in our community many, many times over. There were a lot of performers that came here, so I'm not sure where they tried out. But they tried out to be a session musician, both of them, and they didn't get it. But I find that this is something of her history that she did before she got married. She loved music. She loved playing music. She could yodel. She was one of the few people that I know that can yodel. She could yodel up until the day she died. She had Alzheimer's and dementia. She couldn't remember or do much else, but she could still yodel. And the nurses at the nursing home would ask her to yodel, and she could still yodel. This is my family history. My family history is not from here. They're from up north. But you need to look at your own records. When you're looking for records for your female ancestors, look at what you've already got. Start there. That's where we start. Look at what you've already got. You may already have information in records that you've collected for your male ancestors that can tell you about your female ancestors. So these two pictures are my grandmother and her sisters. My grandmother is the one here on the left with the red arrow pointing to her. That's Miss Agnes Marie Curtis Lee Master. She was probably I call her my mother, my other mother, because she practically raised myself and my brother. She came to live with us when I was 3 after my grandfather passed away, and then she passed away 2 months after I got married. So that tells you how long she stayed with us and lived with us. So Mom and Dad worked all the time, so she practically raised us. These are her sisters. The lady there on the far right is Mary Louise Curtis. She was born with a disability. To this day, I don't know what the disability was. I think it was some form of Down syndrome or something like that. And I'll tell you more about her in a minute. But start with what you have. Look at the photographs, look at the documents to find that information about your female ancestors. No reason to run out to an archive or run out someplace else to do research when you may have what you're looking for right in your own home. So be sure and do that first. The information you're looking for or additional information that you didn't really pay attention to when you were looking at those records for your male ancestors could be right there. Many times on our male ancestors records, they had to have informants or they had to have family contacts or something, and they listed their wives and their sisters and their grandmothers and their mothers. So look in those records first. One of the myths that I tried to talk about is that she was just a housewife. And meaning that she just didn't do anything. She was just a housewife. She took care of the house, which is a very monumental job. But she did more than that. She was part of her community. She was involved in her community, whether she was involved with the church or social organizations, civic organizations. She was involved, maybe in the schools with her kids. So think about that. Here's an example, Mr. Donald. This is, and I use this actually goes all across the United States. People see this, so I love sharing the records we have in the archives. This is actually an envelope from the Montgomery County Creamery, dated June the 19th, 1936, for Myrtle Bateman, which is Donald's grandmother.
Correct.
Yes. And I could have Donald tell you, but the way I describe it when I give this presentation is that she had a farm that she operated by herself after her husband passed away. And they had milk cows, and so she sold the cream and the butter and all those things to the Montgomery County Creamery. Well, this is the pay packet that was saved amongst Mr. George Bateman's materials, and we have those in the archives. So some people it may, well, it's just an envelope, why would you keep that? But it helps to document her. It helps to show her history, what she did. When you know her history, you know she went through a lot, because she was considerably young when her husband died and had to take over the farm and raise her children. So very much important to keep those stories alive. First and foremost, our female ancestors did take care of the family in a different way from males. Males, you know, they would do the hard work, they would get their jobs, and a lot of times our female ancestors, up to a certain point, may have stayed home. And then when it came to a point in time when it was acceptable for women to work, they went out and worked too, took care of the family also. So you need to keep that in mind and document those things about your female ancestors. Many of our female ancestors who were not allowed to or were not permitted to work outside the home actually made money in the home. You know, today we have work from home. There's lots of people that work from home today. But it's not a new concept. There are female ancestors that offered their talents and offered to do work to make money to help support the family. Here's an example of that. This is blown up a lot because this is a little newspaper clipping, and it is only about 1 inch by 1 inch. It's really tiny. But it is from Miss Emma Sykes. This is out of a Houston County newspaper. And it is from the Houston County Times from about 1920s. And look what she's offering. Cleaning, pressing, sewing. She says, nice work guaranteed, mail order given, prompt attention, Erin, Tennessee. So not only was she doing that locally, but she was offering to do it by mail order to make money for her family. I don't know Miss Emma Sykes. I have not researched her. I don't know if she was a single woman or if she had a family she was trying to support, if her husband had died or what. But this was in the newspaper. She was offering work. Another thing our female ancestors did was they worked with charitable organizations, volunteered. They volunteered a lot growing up. Many of you knew your parents, your mothers to volunteer, your grandmothers to volunteer, whether it was at the church or historical society or any other organizations that were in the community. They volunteered. And guess what? There's records for that. There could be records. Oh, I really love this newspaper article, this clipping. It's the class went to see the circus. And I love it because there's a big old elephant back there. But many of our parents went on these trips as chaperones and volunteers. And this actually got captured and put in the newspaper. So we have teachers and children. What I like about this is there's the names of some of the children are written on them. But looking in the newspapers, we're going to talk about what records to look in here in a minute. But looking in the newspapers is one of the greatest ways to find your female ancestors listed in what they're doing in the community. I don't know if many of you probably will remember, we don't have them today, but many of you will remember those community columns, or I call them gossip columns, where it says, you know, Mr. and Mrs. Brown had dinner with Mr. and Mrs. Smith, or they went shopping or whatever. You couldn't do that today. I guess it's like the Facebook of today, but that's where you can find a lot of those female ancestors mentioned.
But too many times it was Mr. and Ms., not,
Yes.
her name wasn't listed very often.
That's right. We're going to talk about that too. That's another hurdle we have to get over.
We had that in Houston County, Miss B. Brewer.
Uh-huh.
We're all the buzz in Houston County.
Yeah. We also had a lot of our people in our communities went to church. We have many, many churches in our community. And they went to church as a family, as a married couple. And those female ancestors did a lot of work in the church. And so there could be records. We have a nice collection of programs from the Erin United Methodist Church that they donated out of their office. And so what's in those programs? Well, it lists who sang the song, who played the organ. And many times these are women. And so that's why it's important for us to look for these records. This is actually not here, but it's the United Methodist Women's Group. It was established in 1869 with only 8 women. They established it. And today, the membership is over 800,000. Now it is called the Methodist Women's Foreign Missionary Society. I'm sorry, it's not called the United Women in Faith. That's what it used to be called. And here is, the history of it. In 1869, Clementine Butler and Louise Parker, wives of missionaries to India, made a plea to a group of 8 women in Boston about the spiritual and physical needs of poor women in India. The women could not be treated by male doctors, schooling for girls was almost non-existent, and help was desperately needed. So in November of 1869, this particular organization was formed for that reason. But it still flourishes today for all kinds of things that they help with. And here is a picture of the founders of that organization. And like I said, you can actually go out on the internet, find the website for this organization, and you can see what they do today. Closer to home, this is from the Erie Cumberland Presbyterian Missionary Auxiliary. This is actually a deposit slip to the bank. This is what I'm talking about. When I tell people, please don't throw anything away, this is what I'm talking about. You would not think a deposit slip for a bank would be historical, but it is. Because it's the only place maybe that this person is mentioned in a document. And this is Mrs. J.C. Bunnell. This is from April the 3rd, 1939. And she was the secretary or the treasurer of this particular auxiliary. And she was depositing money in their bank account. So again, you never know where you're going to find some great information. Another example is the American Red Cross. Many of us know about the American Red Cross, but it has a very lengthy history, and it was founded by a woman, Miss Clara Barton. And men and women both have been volunteering for the American Red Cross. They're very important when we have tragedies. They're usually the first ones on the scene to help. But they were founded in 1881. Some of you may remember when we were able to look at this particular and wonderful quilt. This is a World War I, or before they called it World War I, it was the German-American War because we didn't have World War II, so they didn't call it World War I. But this was a quilt that was donated to the city of Tennessee Ridge. And on this quilt is handwritten veterans of World War I. We were able to actually index all of the names. I think there's over 200 names on there. And it is now hanging on display at the Tennessee Ridge City Hall. But my understanding is that this was a fundraiser during World War I. They made the quilt, and I think they auctioned it off, or they raffled it off and made some money for the cause. So I wanted to show that. Social and civic clubs. We have a lot of those in Houston County, and we try to collect records on all of those. Many times these organizations win, some of you are members of them. If you've been a president or a vice president, treasurer, secretary, and if you sign on for that, many times you get handed a box. And in that box are all the treasury records or all the secretary records, and you're like, okay, I don't have room in my home for this. And so many times they'll donate those to the archives. What's important about those? Well, they contain membership lists. They contain financial records that include members. They include newspaper clippings. They include event programs. So those kinds of records are very important. So if you're a member of one of these organizations and you have records that are just being stored somewhere and you need to find a place for them, they would be safe in the archives. We have the American Legion records, we have the Chamber records, we have the local business women's records, which is no longer in existence. We have the, gosh, I can't think of the name of it. It was an organization at the Erin Methodist Church. It was for the over 50 people. They went out and they did all kinds of Golden Agers. Thank you. We have the Golden Agers records. So anything like that we would love to have. Here is an example. This is, again, Cancer Society. And what's wonderful about these types of newspaper, this is from 1974, is there's a picture, but then there's names identifying who everybody is. And again, yeah, Brenda, it says Mrs. on a lot of them. It says Mrs. Because, you know, and a lot of genealogists, a lot of people don't think that that is a slight on the woman. And in actuality, when you do the research on the reason they referenced a woman that way, it was out of respect. That was actually truly a respect thing. But anyway, a great newspaper article showing these local women. Another way we can document our female ancestors is honoring them, especially if they were good cooks or if they made particular dishes. I think food in genealogy is one of the best ways not only to document our family history, but if you have family members that don't like talking about this stuff, you start talking and their eyes kind of glaze over, just start talking about food. Because they'll talk about food. Ask them, you know, what was grandma's best recipe that you loved? If you have the recipe, make it and take it to a family gathering. You know, food actually brings back tons of memories to people. smelling the food, tasting the food. It's a great tool to get people talking about family history. But it's also a great way to document your ancestors. This is another newspaper article. This is Mrs. P.L. Cook of Tennessee Ridge. She won a prize for 1,000 jars, canned jars. And I don't know if that's a basement or a, what would you call that? Not a basement, but a, huh?
Cellar.
A cellar, thank you. So yeah, and this was the contest was from the Nashville Tennessean. And so yeah, this is a $3,000 Greater Home Gardens contest. And she was the first prize winner from Houston County. So I can't imagine 1,000 jars. But yeah, that's a lot. But she may, I don't know her, maybe she was just a housewife. Maybe she just raised her family. But she got in the newspaper and she did something pretty wonderful. Family recipes, I'm going to dwell on that just a little bit more. I am not a cook. I don't cook very well. I can cook. I wouldn't starve, but my husband is a cook in the family. We made an agreement when we first got married that he'll cook, I'll clean. And it's worked for 37 years. So, no, he cooks. But my grandmother was a great cook. His grandmother was a fantastic cook. And we have a lot of their recipes, which is fantastic. To me, handwritten recipes, or even if you can hand them down verbally, is a great way to document your family history, because normally recipes get lost to time. There is an apple cake recipe that I had been trying to find that my grandmother made up with my brother and I growing up. My brother even called me one day and said, "Hey, do you have Grandma's apple cake recipe?" "No, I don't," because I got all of her recipe cards. It's not in there, so it means it was up here. She never wrote it down. So if you know those recipes, you need to write them down too. Here is one of my grandmother's handwritten recipes for her chess pie. I love her handwriting. I can see my own handwriting. I told you she pretty much raised me, and I can see where she probably had a hand in teaching me to write, because when I write in cursive, it looks a little bit like that. Not as pretty. But this is a handwritten recipe of hers, and I treasure it. I don't use them because I don't cook, but I treasure them. Next, I'm going to show you a couple of recipes that are very interesting. This is from my husband's side of the family. When we got married, his mother didn't know that I didn't cook, but she must have foresaw something. And she actually taught my husband to cook very, very early on. His first meal he cooked at the age of 10. He made spaghetti. But she gifted us a handmade cookbook that she made of all the favorite recipes. But what was even more interesting is that she not only did she give us the recipes, but she wrote stories about how she got the recipes on the recipe cards. So we got this book, and we still have it today, and we still reference it, and my husband cooks out of it. Oh, I'm going to go back to that. So here's one of them. This is for pumpkin bread. And the pumpkin bread is just a recipe, but what she writes about it is what's interesting. She says, "This recipe came from a lady that lived in Stewart when I was a child." My mother-in-law grew up in Stewart. "She was a wonderful cook, and I used to go to her house and help her in the kitchen while she made dishes I had not ever heard of. Her name was Ollie Bell Pitt." I don't know if anybody knows Ollie, remembers her. She and her husband, Cutter, ran a small grocery store and restaurant. They had a jukebox, and we would go there and dance after school. They also liked playing rook and had several tables of rook games going each Saturday night. She took this bread to a social held at the community center in Stewart, which was the school I attended, the Stewart School. It was a community center. I've made this bread throughout the years, and it's always good, but I can't stay out of it. So what wonderful history. I mean, now we have a recipe. She mentioned Ollie Bell Pitt. She mentioned the Stewart School. So some fantastic information and history there. I'll show you one more. This is a cake and jello recipe. She got this recipe from Bessie Barker Barnes. This was my husband's, it would be his great aunt. So on the Barker side. She says, "When our trailer was damaged by a tornado," and this would have been in Michigan, in Tennessee Ridge. We moved to Michigan and stayed with your Aunt Bessie and Uncle Wilton Barnes until we could find a place. While we were there, she made this dessert and it was so good and easy to make. You can also freeze this for a later time. And so you may recognize the recipe, but the story is as well. And she did probably 30 to 40 recipes this way and wrote the stories. And so I'm encouraging you that if you have recipes that you're known for within your family that you do, sit down and write the stories. If you made up the recipe yourself, then write it out. If you got it from someone else, write that story too. I'm going to go back. Food story and traditions. This is a little bit different than recipes. Again, I do a lot of teaching to genealogists about how to get their living family members talking about family history because many of our family members don't want to talk about it. Even my husband's grandmother, Miss Ruth, when I would ask her questions, she would say, well, why do you want to know all that? You know, she never understood why, or she would say, we never talked about it. And so trying to get some of your family members talking because they know more than what they think they know. And so if you start talking about food, they'll talk about food and then that'll lead to other stories, other family stories. And so also document those family food traditions. We all have them, whether they're at the holidays, at birthdays, certain times of the year. Maybe you always canned or did, killed hogs. My husband talks about his grandfather killing hogs at a certain time of year and doing this. So those are our food and family traditions. And now I'm going to talk about late bloomers. We talked about women and researching them before they married. Let's talk about women and long after they've married or long after they've lived a lot of their lives. I call those late bloomers. Don't discount when they get older that may have done something or accomplished something. I can tell you that my mother went back to nursing school at the age of 42. And so, we're always trying to improve ourselves, always trying to get out there hopefully and do things and be involved. So here's a couple examples. Many of you may or may not know who this is. She's not a local woman. Her name was Anna Mary Robertson Moses, or she's very well known as Grandma Moses. And if you don't know who Grandma Moses is, hang on in a minute, I'll show you. She was born in 1860. She spent a lifetime as a housewife. Again, she was just a housewife, right? And at the age of 76, her arthritis kept her from doing the sewing. So her sister suggested that she take up painting at the age of 76. If you know who she is, you know that she was a very, very well-known painter. There are many instances of her work in the Smithsonian and in other museums, art museums. And she started at the age of 76. So those of you sitting here who think you're all dried up and done, you're not. You can start painting today. And you could be another Grandma Moses. So, you know what kind of talent you got. And I'm bringing back my husband's grandmother because she was also a late bloomer. She did things early in her life before she married. She did things later in life. She never stopped. This woman had the energy of, I don't know what, the Energizer Bunny. But she was a fantastic, she scared me. When I first met her, I was scared to death of her. One of the first things that after we got married and we moved to Tennessee Ridge, she came to our house one day for something, and she went into my kitchen, she looked at my sink, there were dishes in the sink. She went into my laundry room, opened up the dryer, looked at my dryer, and there was clothes in my dryer. And as she walked out the door, she said, Melissa, you got dishes in your sink and you got clothes in your dryer. What are you doing all day? So she was a worker. She was, when I went, first meal when we were dating, went to her house, and that is where, and you're going to laugh at me, this is where I was introduced to a stick of butter. I was sitting there and there's a stick of butter on the table, and I asked my husband, I said, what is that? He said, that's butter. I said, no, butter is yellow and comes in a tub. Because we use margarine, but we called it butter. And so he always laughs at me that I didn't know what a stick of butter was. She was born in 1921. She worked her entire life in the home up till a certain point. She told me at the age of 13, her family needed money. So they put her on a train and sent her to Illinois to work for a family, cooking and cleaning, someone that she didn't even know. Nobody knew who they were. It was an advertisement in the newspaper. They needed someone to come and help, and their family put her on a train and just sent her. She said, I was there for 2 weeks and I left. She said, I couldn't do it. So, but later in life, her husband, Mr. Laney Barker, died in 1977. And so then she was by herself. And she decided that she would go back to school. And she became a beautician. When I talk about her out in public, people will say, oh, she used to do my hair. Her hair salon was first in her home, off her home at Grace Crossing. And then she used the old store building as her beautician place. Here's a newspaper clipping I found where she was welcoming another beautician into her shop. But yeah, she did this when she was past the time when you go to get a new career, especially back then. But she did, because she needed to make money to keep herself going. And so always look for your ancestors. Don't predict that they're only doing things from this time to this time. When they're younger, they may have done things you don't know anything about, because a lot of times they do things like your mother or your grandmother, and they don't tell you these things. You have to figure it out, find records. Or later in life. Maybe our female ancestors are a keeper of the family history. Many of them did. Many of them were the ones who wrote the information in the family Bible. A lot of times because they had better penmanship. But maybe they kept the records. They kept the vital records, the death certificates, the birth certificates. They kept family histories, photographs, things like that. And so they are very important to our families. Maybe they kept diaries or journals. I love diaries and journals because that's where they wrote down stuff that you're not going to find in any records. Whether it's good or bad or ugly, that's where you're going to find, or scrapbooks. I love scrapbooks too. This is a handwritten diary, not from here, Charlotte Bronte, from 1816 to 1855. Many times this is what they look like, the diaries. Don't be afraid to read them. I've heard genealogists say, oh, but there's such personal information in there. Well, there is, but if they're no longer here, it's their history, it's their thoughts, their feelings, things that you're not going to find in any other record source. Many of our family members wrote letters. One of the things as an archivist and a historian today that really concerns me is that we're losing our history every single day. Because when was the last time any of you wrote a letter? Or a postcard? Or got film developed with photographs and handed a photograph to somebody? And you think about all those emails, all of that social media stuff, all of your photographs that are right now on your phone that you keep telling yourself, I need to get those off my phone. They're going to go away one day. And we're going to have, archivists talk about it today, we're going to have a gap of missing history because of all the electronics. We love our electronics, it helps us, it's very convenient. We're losing a lot of history because it's not being saved. So I love old letters. I love to read old letters. Here is a postcard from the archives. This one was written Vita Thomas, and she mailed it to Miss Hallie Griffin. Many of you may know these names from Houston County. She was in Georgia, and I think I can read this. She said, we had a nice trip down here. The weather is no warmer than Tennessee. Elias looks like Jane, or Ewing, left for Charleston at 9 today. Ewing and I spent most of the day downtown. He seems slightly better. So yeah. And at the top it says, I bought the wedding gift, whatever that means. So these are going to be rare because we don't do postcards anymore. This one is from 1937. But many of you have these in your records at home. That's why I'm telling you to look at them. This one is from my family genealogy, actually my husband's family. This is a postcard from 1886. It was written by Almeida Ann Glasgow Burcham. This is my husband's family on his dad's side. Her father was Jesse Glasgow, who's my husband's third great-grandfather. I've been researching Jesse Glasgow for over 35 years. He's a fascinating man. But his daughter wrote him this postcard. I can read the postcard, but her spelling is absolutely atrocious. It's awful. But it's the only known example of her handwriting and her signature. that we have. And it's just talking about some kind of legal stuff that I really can't figure out what she's talking about. But I have it in the family history records, which is a good thing. And this is from my side of the family. This is a postcard from my third great-grandmother. Actually, my second great-grandmother. She had been married before, and her, which is my great-great-grandfather, and he died in a horrible elevator accident, but she remarried. And she remarried to Mr. Ladd, and they went on their honeymoon to this place called Put-in-Bay, Ohio. If you look it up, it's still a destination place. But what I love about this postcard is that this is their honeymoon. Look at the picture. Now, I know back then they told people, don't smile, we're going to take your picture, don't smile, it's going to take a minute. But I always laugh because I think they're on their honeymoon and they don't look like they're very happy on their honeymoon. And this is from 1925. So, and then it says down here, I'm on the wings of love. And I thought, boy, you don't look like you're on the wings of love. But they actually moved out to Oklahoma when Oklahoma became a state. And they had a store and all kinds of stuff out there. The family scrapbook, I already mentioned that. Maybe your female ancestors were the family scrapbookers. They collected family memorabilia. Maybe they sat down with the newspaper every week when it came out, clipped it out, put it in a scrapbook. If you have some of those scrapbooks, get them out, look at them, see what kind of information is in there. This is a newspaper scrapbook we have in the archives. We don't know who compiled it, but we love scrapbooks because many times they clip stuff out of the newspaper when that newspaper wasn't saved. And so we can go to the scrapbooks and maybe find it. And maybe they clip something out about your ancestor and it's in a scrapbook in an archive somewhere. Maybe they were the family genealogists. Maybe they kept up with the family history and passed it down or wrote it in the family Bible. Many females did that. A lot of males did too, but mainly it kind of fell to the females. So maybe they conducted some genealogy research as best they could before the internet. But there's still people that traveled all over the place and did that kind of stuff. And maybe they have those records. Maybe you have your own family history in your family records and you just don't know it's there. I know Miss Marilyn did some family history, didn't she?
No, but all her life. She really enjoyed it.
Thank
Yes.
goodness.
Story.
Thank goodness.
Yes, thank goodness.
Yeah, not
'Cause-
lost. It's not lost. You know.
Well, and Scott has shared some stuff with the archives. He's allowed us to scan a lot of things that his mother had put together, some scrapbooks and
Yeah.
things. So it's been fantastic. She also put together some scrapbooks on the Irish celebration.
Yeah.
And so we wouldn't have a lot of the history we know of that celebration without what she did too. This is a story that I tell in a lot of my presentations because it's a sad story, but it's a story that makes you think. Several years ago, I had a couple of sisters come into the archives and they were carrying 2 boxes that look like that on the left with all these binders in them. And they said that they were cleaning out their mother's house, that their mother was in the nursing home, they were cleaning out her house, and they were going to throw this stuff away. But someone told them to come check with me to see if I wanted it. When I started looking at the binders, I figured out it was about 50 years worth of their mother's genealogy and family history research. And that was their daughters, and they didn't want it, so they're going to throw it away. Well, I got to looking at the surnames in these binders, and this contained original photographs, original documents. But the surnames had nothing to do with Houston County. In fact, all these surnames are like from Pennsylvania and Maryland and up north. I thought if I don't take these, they're going to go throw these away. So I took them, and I still have them. So I offered to do lookups and things. I've tried to find an archive up north to send them to, but a lot of archives are so full, they just don't take much anymore. But so I still have these. I saved them because all I could think about is this woman spent 50 years of her life documenting her family history, and her daughters were just going to throw it away. So that's why I tell people, don't throw it away. Just bring it to the archives, donate it, we'll go through it. If it's stuff we don't need, we'll get rid of it. But you just don't know what's in there that's local history or family history that someone's looking for. The Mrs. Hurdle. Brenda brought it up about the Mrs. being referenced as Mrs. It's not done as much today. I have heard it, but not as much. But back in the day, the Mrs., when you were referred to as Mrs., in newspaper articles or even on official documents, they didn't put their first name. They would put Mrs. John Brown. So when you're doing research, it's difficult if you don't know who that is, other than Mrs. John Brown. You don't know who that is. So it's a hurdle we have to overcome. So here is an example of that. This is another little newspaper clipping. It's about this big, it's tiny. It's a golden wedding anniversary announcement, and it's Mr. and Mrs. John Baggett of Erin celebrate their golden wedding anniversary May 16th. Mr. Baggett is 77 years of age, and Mrs. Baggett is 72. Several of their friends called during the day, and they received several nice cards and gifts. Now, in this day and time, we can go online, we can probably figure out who the Mrs. is by looking for marriage records or something like that. But if you just looked at this little newspaper, you wouldn't know who the Mrs. is. It's just Mrs. John Baggett. So, but we should be glad that our female ancestors are mentioned in any record. Because in a lot of records that I have seen, they're mentioned as wife, or daughter, or sister. You know, that's how, and wills, and last will and testaments, especially for their husbands. They say, I leave to my wife, or I leave to my sister. They don't even give them their whole name, or even part of their name, or even their first name. And so if they're mentioned at all, we should just be grateful. So where do we find the records? In archives, libraries, archives, museums. Many historical and genealogical societies have buildings with records in them. And a lot of these records are not online. Some of you do online research. That's great. There's records coming online all the time. But you're still going to have to access records in these places, because that's where I say the really good records are. They're really unique. Scrapbooks and diaries and old letters and things like that are. Newspapers is a great place to find your female ancestors and your male ancestors. And I encourage you to read the newspaper. A lot of our newspapers are online. Unfortunately, our local ones are not as much online. But the Tennessean you can access for free back to 1812. The Clarksville paper you can access back to a certain time period, and you can search for your ancestors. Up until a certain point in time, Houston County was reported on a lot in the Nashville newspapers. I've been researching a lot in those to try and find local history for the archives in those newspapers. Here's an interesting one. I don't know if any of y'all may have heard of this. But this is called, these are legal notices. When you're reading newspapers, I would encourage you to read the legal notices even. But this is a not responsible legal notice. And it would happen when there was a divorce, and usually the husband would publish this in the newspaper. It says, notice, my wife Effie Adamson Burkett, having left my board without just cause, all persons are hereby warned not to harbor her on my account, as I will not be responsible for any bills contracted for by her. We don't put those in the newspaper anymore, but back then they did. This is from 1940. The other one says, my wife, Mrs. Annie Holmes Schultz, having left my board, same thing. He's not responsible. So I don't think we would dare put something like that legally, like we could put that in the newspaper. Back then they did. They would put it in there and they'd say, I'm not responsible for her. If she incurs a bill or has anything, I'm not responsible for her. And what I talked about earlier, this is from our own newspaper from 1950. The little community columns, if you go back and look at those newspapers, there's probably 10 to 15 of them in every newspaper. And it was printed every week. I've done some research on how these came to be or how they were done, because I think, how can we do this today? But there would be someone in that community that everybody knew wrote the articles, and people would actually call them or stop by or send them a little note and say, this is what's happened, please put it in the paper. They wanted their names in the paper. They liked seeing their names in the paper. And so this is the Arlington News from the Arlington community from 1950. And it talks about Mr. and Mrs. Jane McMillan and daughter spent Christmas with his parents, Mr. and Mrs. Paul McMillan. I mean, you know, if you're doing genealogy research, Brenda, I know, does this all the time. If you can just find your ancestor mentioned, it can be a wonderful thing, especially if you can't find them in any records. So newspapers is always a great way to go. This is actually from the Meriwether Lewis Electric Report magazine from 1959. This is actually Mrs. Homer Carey at her built-in electric range in her all-electric home. It was a new thing in 1959. The Carries enjoy winter and summer climate control with an electric heat pump. So, you know, it was a big thing in 1959. Yeah, so.
I believe he was a banker, wasn't he? Is that
Homer
something?
Carey?
Homer
Yeah.
Carey, yeah.
Mhm. Here's another wonderful newspaper clipping. This is actually from a flood damage in the county, or a tornado, I think.
63,
Yeah, this is from 1968. Yeah. And it says, Mrs. Frank Stone, Miss Kay Smith, and Mrs. Belle Harvey were the first of Erin's residents to receive water trucked in to Erin Thursday by the Tennessee National Guard. I believe that was a pretty good flood that year. I've got lots of pictures from that flood. But what I love about this is these women probably never knew that their picture was going to be taken, because the second lady in the middle, she has her hair in curlers. And I wondered when that newspaper came out what she thought of that. But they were there with their water containers getting water. So Historical Society, Genealogical Society, anywhere you can find records. I look everywhere for records for my family. Like I said, I've been researching for 35 years. If I can find a record, I'll get a hold of it. This is the records that Scott brought in for me to look at, and I scanned some of them. This is from the Lyle family. There's a ledger book, there's newspaper clippings, there's photographs, scrapbooks, and all kinds of other stuff that Miss Marilyn actually collected over the years on the Lyle family. And so it was fantastic stuff. So what do these places have? They have vertical files, manuscript collections, special collections, newspapers, photographs, family histories. They have a wealth of information in a lot of these archives. But most importantly, our female ancestors are very important to research. Whether it's before they got married, while they're married, or after they married when they're older. Maybe they started a whole new profession, like my grandmother, my husband's grandmother did. Tell their story. That's the main thing. Everybody on this earth that's walked this earth has a story to tell. And it's up to those of us who are living, who know the stories, to tell them so they're not forgotten. So the last couple of stories I'll tell you about are these. These ones are not happy stories, I'll just tell you that. This is my great aunt, the one I told you about earlier, who was born with a disability. Her name was Mary Louise Curtis. I talked to my father about her, because that was his aunt, and she lived at home with the family, which was very unusual for that time. Usually they put these people away where they weren't seen or heard, but she was raised by the family until a certain age, and whatever it is that she had wrong with her, it turned her violent. So they had to put her in a home. So they put her in the Apple Creek State Institute, which is in Ohio. And when I found this out, I wanted to find records. Well, most institutional records like this are not open to the public. In fact, a lot of them have been destroyed over the years. And I actually somehow got in contact with the previous director of this institute when it closed. And for whatever reason, he had records at his home on these patients, on these residents. He didn't have a bunch of records, but he had the final disposition cards of them. So he sent me hers. And which was, it's one of those things you almost have to go to court to get these days, but he just sent it to me, so I was like, thank you. You know. And so, yeah, she finally did pass away, but like I said, the family raised her. She carried a doll with her all the time, and but like I said, at a certain point in time, she got violent and the family couldn't handle her, so they put her in an institution. But that's her there. And then the other one is, I love telling this story, but it's not a good story either. These are my great-grandparents, my grandmother's parents. This is Lula Lavinia Coonrod Drummond and her husband. And my grandmother, which was the youngest of 13 children, in 1940 she was graduating high school. That same year, her father, which is here, filed for a divorce and also filed with the court to have his wife committed because he wanted to be with another woman. In 1940, women didn't have a whole lot of rights. There's not much they could have done. So she was committed. My grandmother tells me the story of the day they came and got her. She was there at the house, and she said they literally drug her out of the house and took her away. I said, well, you have older brothers and sisters that are married. Why didn't they do anything? She says, we couldn't do anything. The courts had ruled, and this is what was going to happen. So 2 weeks after she was committed, he married the other woman. She stayed in the institution for 15 years.
Wow.
This piece of paper you see here, I inherited my grandmother's belongings, and within her belongings was this piece of paper. This piece of paper is dated 1956, and it is her paper saying she's cured, and she was released from the hospital.
Wow.
She carried it with her the rest of her life, and she lived another 15 to 20 years. What's even more crazy to me is that all family functions, this was taken much later. This was the man who had her committed. This was at a family event. He would come with his other wife to family events, and I don't understand that. I never got to ask my grandmother about that. But that's them. After she got out of the insane asylum and after, yeah, that's them. So we all have stories to tell, whether it's good, bad, or ugly, and I would encourage you to tell them all. Don't bury the bad ones. Don't forget about the bad ones. You know, maybe it's not such a good idea to tell everybody or to announce it, but document it, because it's going to get lost like everything else. So, you know, the dates there. She died in 1977. She got out in 1956. So that tells you how much longer she lived after she was deemed cured. And thank you. If y'all got any questions, please let me know. And I hope that encourages you. If you do genealogy research, I hope it encourages you to keep on doing it and to document those family members. And if you haven't done it in a long time, pick it back up and see what you can find out. So if you got any questions, I'll answer them. If not,
Well,
Yeah.
on the cookbook part,
yeah.
we at the senior center have been asked to put in our recipes for a cookbook that the old jail is
The
doing.
FC,
Yeah,
FC is doing
So,
it.
they're wanting them encouraged to
Yeah.
turn them
They are.
in.
Yeah, if you have
very quickly.
recipes.
So, I got mine in my purse right now, turn it in tomorrow.
Yeah, if you've got recipes you want published, the FC is actually producing a cookbook. So, yeah, get with them and get your recipes to them. I think food is one of the strongest, they say smell and taste is one of the strongest memories makers. That people that smell things, you have a memory, or if you taste things. And so when you're gathering with your family members, you know, make some of those old family dishes and just see what they start talking about, who made it. You know, they'll start out that way, but then they'll start talking about, oh, well, you also know that, and they'll tell another story and then another story. And so I love sitting and listening to stories. I would go to my husband's father's house, and he would start talking, and he would start telling stories. And I would listen, and we lived to go home. As soon as I got home, I was writing it all down so I wouldn't forget the stories. Because a lot of that stuff is not in a record or a document anywhere. It's only in someone's head. It's like Nina Finley. When Nina Finley passed away, 2 weeks before she passed away, she came to the archives to see me. And I told her, I said, Nina, you've got to sit down and write what is not in your books, but is up here. And she says, oh, no, you know, like that. I said, okay, well, sit down at night with a recorder and just talk. And I don't know, 2 weeks later, she was gone. And we lost a lot of history that was up here. Because her son called me and said, would you like to have all of the research records out of the attic that belonged to Mom? And I was very excited because I thought, oh, there's going to be a ton of stuff in there. And I was honestly disappointed. There's a lot of records, boxes and boxes and boxes. Mainly it was copies of stuff she copied out of books at the Tennessee State Library and Archives. Majority of what she knew was up here. But she was a very intelligent woman, and she knew history, not only Houston County history, but all the families around here and everything. But it was all up here. And I was just amazed. So if you have it all up here, get it down somewhere so that it can be recorded and remembered and, you know, something like that. So anything else? Oh, thank you. Appreciate it. Last minute, I hope I did okay.
Enjoyed it.
All right. And I'm going to ask for someone to make a motion to adjourn the meeting. Do you have anything else?
So moved.
All right. Second?
I'll say.
All right, all in favor, we adjourn the meeting.
Aye.
Yay!